Today's episodes are special, not because we're taping live. That's just one reason. The other reason is because of where we are. We have gathered at 15th Avenue Baptist Church in Nashville, the church where my grandfather pastored for 24 years. The church that helped shape my family. The church that nurtured a young man named Walter Murray, who was one of the first Blacks to step foot on Vanderbilt University campus. Now, tomorrow, Vanderbilt will honor my uncle, his legacy, not just because he was a pioneering student, but also because he was a trusted leader and trustee. Tonight, however, our conversation is not going to focus on biography. It's not going to be a biography lesson. And it's not only about him. Tonight, it's about something bigger. What happens to Black legacies in a world where stories can be rewritten, minimized, or erased? What is the obligation of this generation and those to come to sustain and advance the legacies of the past? We have an esteemed panel, including the daughter of Walter Jr., Simone. And I will start with Simone with my first question. What do we owe the legacies we inherited? And what happens if we fail to pay that debt?
Thank you, Tamara. I just want to say I'm so happy to be here. And this church is part of my legacy. One of the first pictures I actually remember seeing of my grandfather, Reverend Walter Murray Sr., was when this was the sanctuary and this was the pulpit. And there's a picture of him sitting in the middle with the choir around him. And my grandmother is sitting like at the end in the corner. And I said, Grandma, were you and Grandpa married at that point? And she was like, I was 18. I wasn't thinking about that old man. But just goes to show just how, both sides of my family, like this is, I remember coming here as a little kid on Sundays, when I came back to visit and sitting with people and just, so being here is really special to me. But to answer your question regarding what do we owe our legacy, I think there are three things: determination, perseverance, and excellence. I think about the stories that my father used to tell me about how hard he worked, about, dealing with racism, segregation, living in poverty. He told me he used to come home after school and make mayonnaise, salt, and pepper sandwiches. Which, yes, it sounds horrible, but that's what he had. But he still, was a stellar student, and he worked hard to get where he was and achieve what he did. And he always instilled in us a sense of, you always have to be clean, you always have to look presentable. He was an absolute stickler for English, for being able to speak well, to project yourself in the right manner from the way that you look. Like, I remember he was livid when I got my first tattoo, but I was able to cover it up. So he tolerated it a little bit, but that was just, he was saying, think about how those white people are going to look at you when you step out the door and what they're going to think about you. And another story, he used to write us letters. And going back to him being a stickler for English and making sure that we are very well read and well spoken, he wrote me a letter of disappointment, which I got from him on a semi-regular basis because I was a little wild when I was younger. But he used the word pusillanimous in the letter. And I was like, Dad, what does that mean? And he was like, go look it up. So I went to look it up, and it turns out that it means paltry and mean-spirited. I was like, wow. But I still remember that word, almost 40 years. So that's just an example of, kind of the legacy of excellence that he instilled in us. And I know that I owe it to him and the rest of my ancestors to continue to move that forward and to stay dedicated to working hard. And then in terms of the other part of your question, what happens when you fail to deliver what you owe to that legacy? It's a really interesting question for me because I almost failed. And when you fail, you risk putting a pause or stopping that forward motion that your ancestors have been pushing towards. And there was a time in my life where I kind of didn't know where I was going, what I was doing, kind of lost my way. But thankfully, the sense of excellence and hard work and dedication, all these lessons that my father taught me and my mother as well, that always stayed in the back of my mind, even though I kind of lost my way for a while. They helped bring me back. And I can't imagine if I had spent the rest of my life like not being able to get back to where I was supposed to be. And my father had a really unique ability to like walk in someone else's shoes, regardless of where they were from, how they behaved, what kind of things that they were going through. And that applied to me too. Even when I was going through the roughest time in my life, he was still strict and still like, Simone, you got to get yourself together. But he also was very understanding and always instilled, regardless of what I went through, what I did, that he always loved me and I could always come home. And, my mother and father never abandoned me. And because of that, that's why I'm a biocompatibility scientist today, because of that legacy and how it pulled me through. But when we fail when we don't pay what we owe, that's when our families kind of lose their way, and you hear about people where maybe they come from a long line of greatness, but then they lose that, and then their kids may not even know what they had. So when you fail to pay what you owe to your legacy, it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts your community.
Simone reminds us that legacy isn't just what someone leaves behind. Legacy is also what we keep alive. Thank you so much, Simone. What responsibility does this generation bear to protect the past? And how will history judge us if we don't?
I guess I would say that when you look at legacy, the legacy of the African American group as a whole is constantly under attack. It's been under attack since the beginning. And there's the greatest responsibility just to maintain our legacy. If you look at it, a lot of different structures were built by African Americans. The White House was built by African American slave labor. The entertainment, sports, any arena you look in, it's built by Blacks. It doesn't necessarily mean that those Blacks were compensated or that they were able to benefit from that labor. And so in protecting the legacy, you're also protecting the economics of the Black community. And so basically, yes, African American community has like the highest responsibility to keep that legacy, whether it's business, education, music, wherever, whatever the arena is. And also, you said that what do we lose? You actually, the world would capitalize on us not preserving our legacy. They would benefit from us not keeping that legacy. And so that's how I would look at it, is that we need to preserve it so we don't lose the benefits of that legacy.
Thank you. I think legacy in both aspects, what the family has said is in both aspects, both how you said how we see and how it's brought down, more importantly, how you see outwardly in the world, but how legacy also is built from eternally in family. For example, I would not have known what our legacy was had we not had that family reunion over 10 years ago. Walking through Vanderbilt, and the group here in Nashville put together to bring our whole family together to talk about what legacy is. More importantly, Edna Murray, who was my grandmother, talked about little things like that along the way, building legacy, how we should handle each other within, meaning always have that humility for our family, no matter what happens, how we look at each other over time. For example, having not seen so many of the family members here over years, was like it was just yesterday walking into Ronnie's house this afternoon. But then more importantly, how that legacy is passed down for me to pass down to the next. How we do that as individuals, ourselves, meaning how each one of us take that legacy forward in our own respect, and how I do that as far as the legacy for what I can do for the history of our family. For one, being the aviator, the sole aviator in the family, one thing I learned too as well is that not only may not be able to pass that particularly down to the next person in our family, but I'm branching that out to the world. And so making sure that there are generations we talked about externally, because financial stability is the point to the future of minorities. Until we understand how important it is to have financial stability, then we can build a lasting impression of how we want our history and our impressions to go forward. Most importantly, education. So with that, I've worked through different organizations in the aviation aspect, such as Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, Sisters of the Skies, which deal with making sure that women of color have opportunities to build into aviation, more so working with the Boys and Girls Club of America, and also having those opportunities to introduce them to aviation, more so not just the introduction, but giving them the financial backing to achieve the dreams that they might not have been having the opportunity to accomplish. So with that, creating the 501(c)(3)s to have that financial backing, building stability, people understand that our legacy is not just from within, but branches out. Because the more we branch out, the more we build up. We have to reach back to build up together.
Legacy is often inherited, not chosen. What does it feel like to carry a legacy you didn't ask for?
At first, it was a lot of pressure, and it still can be a lot of pressure, maybe more so for my brothers than for myself. But considering my father's achievements, just the fact that he was a brilliant man, it is a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pride, but it's also a lot of pressure, especially when you go through a point where maybe you don't know where you want to be or what you want to do. Or in my case, I was in medical school for about a year and a half, and feeling that pressure to continue those high standards that had been set. But now I feel like even though I didn't choose it and it chose me, it forced me to achieve more, knowing that you have that legacy, whether you chose it or not. It pushes you because you know that you have it in you, whether you want to acknowledge it, whether you want to heed the call. You know that God has something more in store for you, whether you choose to accept it or not. And if you think that you're not going to accept it, it will keep knocking on the door until you listen. So that's my take on it.
Carry on a legacy, it lets me know that I'm not reinventing the wheel. So if you look at, for example, Eric has 5 businesses. There's probably someone in his life before him who owned businesses. And so you have a momentum there. You're not going to be the first Black doctor, even if you look at Brian, his grandfather was a surgeon. So I look at the fact that there's a momentum there. I'm not the first to go to college. I'm not the first doctor. I'm not the first attorney because Barbara's an attorney. You just pick a field and there's someone in my family who's done it before. You want to start a bakery? Call a cousin. She already has a bakery on Jefferson Street. Ask her, how do I start a bakery? And so for that, I appreciate that. I do have that momentum. I don't have to go to the world to ask the question. I can ask my own mom, how do I go about getting my PhD? Why? Because my mom has her PhD. So that part of the legacy is great. It is stressful. Like Simone is saying, it's a lot of stress, but I just appreciate having some sort of starting point. I don't feel like I'm starting at point A. I feel like I'm moving forward.
I think I take the opposite end of that. I think growing up, seeing all those things around us, realizing that everyone in your family is a doctor, is a professor, or has a great career, no matter what, whether it's in education or something, to any aspect, you name it, our family's involved with it. Pastor, you name it, we're in it. I think that is pressure. The reason why it's pressure, because it's already there and it's expected. I take it to look as many people, the young ones, don't remember Michael Jordan. People don't remember how good Michael Jordan was because he did it every day.
Yeah.
At a level that was greater than everybody else. And that is what I look at our family. That's what I see. I see greatness in our family every day.
Yeah.
So living up to that is the challenge. But it's also the drive.
Yeah.
Can I set my own mark so those coming behind me realize how important it is to be successful, to be the cornerstone, to be the next building block to the pyramid of what success is going to look like in your own terms. For me, it's aviation. For you, it's attorney. For you, it's being I can't even remember that profession.
The biocompatibility scientist.
Compatibility scientist. I'm going to get that one. But it's our own journey. But more importantly, in that journey, how are we building it for the next group? How are we setting the next group to build on success? And for me, that in my profession and in my family, I think what my legacy wants to be is that I want to be the one that ensures our family doesn't forget the importance of legacy. I think it's important that I'm happy to be this person that the family looks upon to call when we want to come together. When the house needs to be open or when something needs to happen, I don't mind being that person, because internally, we have to be strong internally before we can be externally important. And so I think building that is what the pressure is.
When does legacy feel like a gift? And when does it feel like a burden?
It feels like a gift when you're struggling, when you don't know where you're going to pull strength from to take that next step, when you don't have the strength on your own. You know that you have your ancestors and your family lifting you up because you see that they've reached those heights. And it goes back to, what Brian and Cherie said, just having that greatness around you, even when you don't feel it in yourself, it's there because it's in your DNA.
I like that point about DNA because it's so true. And I was even thinking, legacy is a gift when it's working. When you do become that next pastor or you do become that judge and they're like, he's great, just like his father. It's a burden when the bullets start flying or, you're that leader and you're a target. Sometimes legacy is a burden when you are singled out for that and maybe attacked for that because of you. Sometimes you're attacked just for being prosperous, just for doing well. But yeah, that would be my answer. And the part about DNA, because people do see greatness just in who we are. Like if you see just Brian walking into the room, you're like, okay, this is someone. Like you see Ian walk in, it's because there's a presence that's going to come with him that comes from all of the legacy, everything that makes them who they are, the blood that's actually running through them.
Knowing your legacy, what do you do when you feel undervalued?
I'm going to go back to my profession, and because I think that's where I'm going to key a point. When I first started wanting to know that I want to be a leader in aviation, there was never anyone that looked like me who I could say, hey, what is it like? Or how do I get there? I can't say that with our family, as you said before. I can go to somebody and say, what does it take to finish your PhD? And how do you do this? And how do you go about getting a thesis? And I can always refer to somebody, but I couldn't do that in aviation. And I remember when I achieved my first role, my leader said to me, you're not loud enough. Because I like to think of myself as a quiet soul. So look, understand, make corrections in a manner that's appropriate for the time. That's how I prefer to lead. And that leader said I wasn't loud enough. And so I learned to make some corrections, go about being more vocal. And the next thing you know, you're too loud.
Wow.
Why are you so
Wow.
Why are you so colorful, if you want to use the word? So in understanding that, going back to your question, having the ability to lean back on what the legacy of our family is, the burden and the strength. The strength, having the family behind, knowing that I can achieve anything because it's been done. The burden is when they find out that there is things that have happened in our family. My grandfather, the first Black mayor, Walter Murray, here at Vanderbilt, they find out your legacy becomes a hindrance because there are many people that do not want us to succeed. But we always find a way to climb. And that is our legacy.
Oh, and I was just going to add one thing. So even coming down here, and I've come for the Murray lecture a few times, and I tell, because I'm like you, I don't talk more than I have to at work. I prefer to let my work speak for itself. But so I, tell people I'm going away for a few days, and they're, oh, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Nashville, and immediately like, oh, you're going to Broadway, and you're going to the honky tonk. And I'm like, no, going for family, and I explain my father's legacy at Vanderbilt and how there's a dorm named after him, and you should see the way people's faces change. Like all of a sudden, now they think that I'm somebody because my father has a dorm at Vanderbilt named after him. And so that's always funny to see that change, because people just look at you or look at me like another Black woman. And they don't expect for my father to have a dorm at Vanderbilt named after him, because usually that's reserved for people that make, multi-million-dollar donations. And so it is very interesting to see how people change and their view of you changes, and their esteem usually goes up when they hear your legacy.
And I was going to say, as a mom, Sharice will always say, don't they know I'm royalty? They need to be ashamed of themselves. Why do they think they can treat me like this? And she's taking this from 1 Peter 2:9. But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should shew forth the praises of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Yeah. Okay, last question. Are there any fears of falling short? Is there pressure that comes with legacy, especially when your family or community includes pioneers or first? Fears of falling short.
I can go unless someone else wants to go first. There's always a fear of falling short. I think about all of the things that my father did in his short life. Even something as simple as I remember he used to read the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. And when I got to college, I'd buy these newspapers and be like, oh my God, like, how does he get all this read? Just those, all kinds of things that he used to do that just amazed me. But I do feel just kind of in awe sometimes and think, how can I get all this done? How can I make that same level of impact? I know that we all have different gifts. Like, I'm a science girl. He couldn't stand the sight of blood. So I understand that we're definitely different, but at the same time, I feel pressure and I'm still trying to figure out, how am I going to make an impact? How am I going to touch people? Not an impact in a way that people know my name, but how can I help people at that same level and touch that same level of lives? So that's something that I still am trying to figure out.
I don't have any fear of falling short. To be honest with you, I realize though, in working so hard, individually, because in America it's all about the individual being successful, I realize that I haven't spent like the person time with the very great people who I always like read about, whether it's all of my cousins, all of my uncles and aunts. And so I said, I'm going to make a concerted effort to just be present. I missed the last family reunion. Last time I saw Brian, he got married like 1,000 years ago. And so it's like stuff like that I think about, and I'm like, how is it that I let 16 years pass and I haven't seen this person? I haven't seen this person since they were 3, and now they're like 30. And so I feel like I'm reading about the greatness on paper, but I'm not showing up in person so that it's real. So I'm like looking at my cousins and stuff like that. It makes it even more impactful.
I thought about this a lot, this question, not per se about the question, but as we were talking about coming to these lectures and reading about things I didn't know that occurred with Walter Murray, my grandfather, Dr. Jackson, things that I didn't know, which leads me to believe that I feel like sometimes I fell short. I do. I really do. More importantly, fell short personally as a family member. And I'm going to go back to what you just said. I strived for almost 20 years in the aviation industry to get to a point that I tried to get to. And I neglected some things, and it was family. And I've realized in the last year and a half that I've left that all the 20 years that I spent trying to achieve in aviation was minuscule to what I achieved in getting closer to my family members, understanding the legacy, and have done more in that understanding in that year and a half to push our legacy forward, because now I think I have the right light, and the Lord will lead you right when you let him guide you in his direction. And the Lord has guided me to understand that my legacy may not be as big as Walter Murray. I may not be the first, but it's incumbent upon me to make sure that I help others achieve what their legacy may be. And that might be funding aviation, building a legacy through understanding 501(c), helping someone in financial stability, but more importantly, or just being there for my daughter's legacy as she creates hers. So I may never achieve what Walter Murray may have done or what my grandfathers have done, but I will ensure that my family's legacy will always live forward. And that may be what my legacy is.
What you've heard tonight is more than family history. It is a charge. What was built before us was not meant to sit still. It was built to be carried forward, protected, and reimagined by each generation that follows. The question now is not what did they leave us, but what will we leave behind? Thanks for listening. This is Emunah, Hebrew for Faith and Belief.
The one characteristic I had that I carried from my dad was probably his personality. I'm a very cheerful person. I love, helping out people. I love serving my community. My dad was the same thing. He loves serving his community, especially when he was at church. He was serving his community, doing a couple of things as being part of the board. And also when it comes to volunteering at the hospital, especially going to people's homes. And, he's part of my fraternity, Omega Psi Phi. He loves volunteering everywhere he can with his fraternity and also, in the community.
I think he'd be proud. But I think it's these latter years he'd also, and Mommy would be too, because like many of the Murray descendants, I too am in ministry. So I'm ordained and licensed minister, as are many of our first cousins and second cousins. So it's that legacy that continues. So sort of the Murray and Jackson, he'd be proud of how that came together and has played out and continued to play out. As I look at the title of your broadcast, Emunah, Hebrew for Faith, I chuckle because we haven't talked that much, but I never shared with you that for 7 years prior to moving back down to Florida, I attended Beth Israel Worship Center in Wayne, New Jersey, where Rabbi Jonathan Kahn is the senior rabbi and pastor. So I got an opportunity to delve into the Jewish side of our faith. And so I saw that podcast. You are bringing. I was just. I stand in awe of God. So my father would be proud of how both sides of the family came together in me and how it's being expressed in what God has had me learn and do and continue to learn and do as I move forward.
Well, my name is Ian Dinkins. I'm a Nashville native, and I work at the University School of Nashville in their communications office. As far as what legacy is, I think it's probably one of those questions where, depending on who you ask, you may get a different answer from everyone. What I generally take it to mean is what you leave behind. So sometimes legacy is, your children and your grandchildren, and that's a form of legacy. But sometimes it's also just, I was a Boy Scout. We used to say, leave no trace. So if you're going on a hike somewhere, pick up your trash. And, if you litter, like that's your legacy. So really just, once you're gone from a space or gone from an area, what is left there from you? That's really how I see legacy.
Did you know you could support this show by downloading and becoming a member of the Alive Podcast Network app? You'll experience unlimited access to Black hosted content, and we'll be able to keep bringing you amazing content week after week.